She was the last Hadza spiritual healer, keeper of ancient wisdom in a sacred grove, where she continued rituals the British missionaries had sworn to eliminate. No one knew she was also the secret lover of Dakarai, the tribe's greatest hunter, who used the sacred space as a base for those resisting forced relocation. When Father William, a young British missionary, discovered the grove and began to question whether his God and her spirits were truly enemies, Asha faced an impossible choice: the carnal love with the hunter who represented her past, or the spiritual connection with the priest who might be her future. But in times of missionary zeal, forbidden love between a healer and a priest wasn't just sin, it was a path to losing everything her people held sacred. And the jealous hunter who knew her secret had the power to destroy them all.
In the heart of the thornbush country surrounding Lake Ayazi in northern Tanzania, where British colonial administrators rarely ventured and missionaries whispered about pagan darkness, there existed a baobab grove that officially had been abandoned 20 years earlier. The colonial records claimed the Hadza people had been successfully relocated to settled areas, their nomadic ways reformed, their animistic beliefs replaced with proper Christian doctrine.
But the maps lied. The sacred grove of their ancestors, hidden beneath a canopy of ancient baobabs whose trunks were wider than huts, still stood as it had for countless generations. And within its sheltered clearing, where shafts of sunlight filtered through the massive branches, Asha continued the healing ceremonies her grandmother had taught her in secret. It was 1898, 15 years after the German colonial administration had first attempted to civilize the Hadza through forced settlement and conversion. Asha was 26 years old, with skin the color of honey-warmed earth and eyes that held the depth of the lake itself. Her hair was cropped short in the traditional Hadza way, adorned with ostrich eggshell beads that marked her as a spiritual healer, a position that technically no longer existed under colonial rule. That dawn in September, as the sun painted the eastern sky the color of fresh blood, Asha knelt in the clearing, preparing the ritual to honor the spirits of the hunt. She wore the leather apron and beaded decorations of her calling, arranging offerings with practiced precision. Wild honey in a gourd, arrows blessed with plant medicine, and the sacred digging stick that connected her to the earth spirits. Each movement was an act of quiet resistance, a way of keeping alive a way of life the colonizers declared dead. The Hadza had been hunter-gatherers for 50,000 years, perhaps the longest continuous culture on Earth. But in a single generation, the British and German had tried to erase what millennia had preserved. "Are you ready?" The deep voice came from the shadows, and Asha felt her body respond instinctively before her mind could process. Dakarai emerged from the concealed entrance to the grove, moving with the silent grace of a hunting leopard. At 32 years old, he was one of the last Hadza hunters trained in the old ways before relocation attempts scattered the clans. His body bore the scars of countless encounters with lions and buffalo, and his eyes carried the hardness of a man who had watched too many of his people die in settlements designed to kill their spirit. "I'm always ready," Asha replied, though her heart had quickened. Not from the ritual, but from the proximity of the man who had broken her vows of spiritual purity 2 years ago. "Are the others here?" "Waiting in the cave below," Dakarai confirmed, stepping close enough that she could smell the wood smoke on his skin. "But before the ceremony starts, I need to talk about using the grove as a meeting point for the next action." Asha tensed. This was a recurring argument, one that threatened to tear them apart more each time. "I've told you no. This is a sacred space, not a war camp. If the British discover it being used for resistance, they'll destroy everything we've preserved. And what good is preserving rituals if there's no free people to practice them?" Dakarai countered, frustration sharp in his voice. "Asha, I understand your grandmother taught you that spiritual spaces must remain pure, but we're fighting for survival. Purity is a luxury we can't afford. He moved closer, his hands finding her waist with the familiarity of lovers who had shared countless nights in these very shadows. We need this place. It's hidden, defensible, and you already have a system for people to come and go undetected. We could store weapons, plan raids on the supply lines, forcing our people into settlements. No, Asha said firmly, stepping away from his touch despite her body's protest. Dakarai, I love you. You know I risk everything keeping you here, but I won't turn a grove dedicated to healing and harmony into a place of violence and death. If you want my love, you must respect my calling. Dakarai looked at her with a mixture of desire and frustration that had become increasingly familiar. Your calling won't feed Hadza children dying in those god-forsaken settlements. It won't free the men forced to work as laborers on German plantations. Sometimes I think you love your spirits more than you love our living people. The words struck like arrows. How dare you? Everything I do is for our people. Every ritual I perform, every teaching I pass on, keeps our identity alive. Without that, even if you won your battles, what would remain of us? We'd just be Africans with Hadza faces, empty of what makes us who we are. The tension between them became almost visible, an invisible battlefield where love and ideology clashed constantly. Before either could say more, they heard voices, young women arriving for the ceremony. Dakarai stepped back, his expression hardening into the impassive mask of the warrior. We'll talk about this later, he said, but it didn't sound like a promise. It sounded like a threat. Asha watched him disappear into the shadows toward the cave system below, where the resistance men waited, and felt a cold grip her heart that had nothing to do with the morning air. She loved Dakarai, loved his strength, his commitment to their people, the way his body knew hers. But lately, she felt they were on diverging paths, her clinging to preserving the soul of their civilization, while he focused only on physical survival. The ritual that morning was both beautiful and painful. 4 young women, none older than 20, repeated the ancestral prayers in Hadza, while Asha guided them through offerings to the spirits of the land. They asked for successful hunts for their brothers, for tubers to be plentiful, for the preservation of their way of life in a world trying to erase it. When the ceremony ended and the women left through the secret tunnels that would return them to their scattered families unseen, Asha remained alone in the main clearing. Sunlight now streamed through the baobab canopy in golden shafts, creating patterns of light and shadow that seemed to dance on the ancient bark. It was then she heard something that froze her blood. Footsteps. Not the silent, confident steps of Dakarai or the women who knew these paths. These were hesitant, exploratory steps of someone who didn't know where they were. And worse, they came from the main entrance, the one that was supposedly invisible to outsiders. Asha moved quickly, hiding the most obviously non-Christian ceremonial items, but it was too late. A figure appeared at the clearing's edge, silhouetted against the morning light. It was a young man, dressed in the dark suit and white collar of a British missionary, with a leather Bible clutched in his hands. His face showed astonishment, fear, and something else, a curiosity that burned in his eyes as he beheld the grove that supposedly had been abandoned decades ago. Asha felt her world crumbling. She had been discovered. And in the age of aggressive missionary conversion, being caught practicing traditional rituals meant only one thing: forced relocation to a settlement where her spiritual authority would be systematically destroyed. But what the young missionary said next changed everything. "Please," he whispered in English with a trembling voice, "don't run. I've been searching for this place for months. I need to understand." And Asha, against every survival instinct, found herself asking in careful English, "Understand what?" "If God is love," the missionary replied, his dark eyes filled with anguish she recognized too well. Why does he command us to destroy everything beautiful others have created in his name? The missionary's name was William Ashford, though he insisted she call him Father William. He was 28 years old, had arrived in East Africa 3 years ago from Oxford with a mission to convert pagan souls, and every day since had questioned his vocation more deeply. During the next hour, an hour that could have ended with Asha's arrest but instead became something entirely different, the healer and the priest talked. At first, Asha maintained distance, ready to flee or scream for Dakarai if the Englishman made any threatening move. But soon she realized Father William wasn't like other missionaries she'd encountered. "How did you find this place?" Asha asked, keeping her voice neutral, neither confirming nor denying this was what he sought. "By accident and divine design, I suppose," William replied, his eyes still roaming the grove's carvings and offerings with poorly concealed wonder. "I was following a sick woman seeking medicinal plants. I lost her in the bush, but found this." He gestured at the grove. "A place that, according to all British records, should be ruins, abandoned 30 years ago." He turned to her, and Asha saw in his eyes a vulnerability she didn't expect from a representative of colonial power. The records lie, don't they? About many things. "Why does it matter?" Asha asked, still cautious. "If you know this exists, your duty is to report it to the Mission Society. I'm a heathen practicing forbidden rituals. I'm exactly what you were taught to fear and eliminate." "I know," William admitted, and for the first time Asha saw tears in an Englishman's eyes. "And that terrifies me, because what I witnessed moments ago, the ceremony, the prayers, the devotion in your eyes, wasn't evil, it was..." He searched for words, "the closest to the sacred I've seen since arriving in this land." He sat on one of the smooth stones that ringed the clearing, his head falling into his hands. "Do you know what we do in God's name? We burn your sacred objects that contain generations of wisdom. We destroy groves whose spiritual significance surpasses our cathedrals. We force people into settlements where they sicken and die, and tell ourselves we're saving souls. We punish children for speaking their own language in our mission schools." He looked up at Asha, and she saw in his face the same torment she sometimes felt in her own heart, when she doubted whether maintaining traditions was worth the lives it cost. "But lately, I've been wondering, what if we're the ones who need saving? What if we're so blinded by our arrogance that we can't see God was already here, speaking through different tongues, worshipped with different names?" The silence that followed was profound. Asha had never heard an Englishman, much less a missionary, question the righteousness of the colonial spiritual conquest. It was dangerous. It was heretical. It was honest. "Why tell me this?" she asked finally. "Why not simply report me and fulfill your duty?" William looked at her directly, and in that moment, something passed between them. Not physical attraction, not yet, but recognition. Two souls in crisis, seeking truths their respective institutions forbade exploring. "Because I've spent 3 years destroying beautiful things in the name of a God who is supposedly love," William said. "And before I destroy one more beautiful thing, I need to understand what I'm actually destroying. I need to know if..." He stopped, as if the next words were treason. "If I've been on the wrong side all along." Asha made a decision that would change everything. "Sit," she said, indicating a space on the woven mat. "If you truly want to understand, I'll show you. But first, you must swear by your God that you won't reveal this place or me, no matter what you see." "Do you trust an Englishman's oath?" William asked with surprise. "No," Asha answered honestly, "but I trust the conflict I see in your eyes. A man with no doubts can't be trusted. A man tormented by them. That's a man who still has a conscience." For the next several hours, Asha taught Father William the fundamentals of Hadza spirituality, She showed him how each ritual was designed not to appease capricious gods, but to maintain balance with the natural world. She explained that their beliefs weren't primitive superstition, but a sophisticated philosophy refined over 50 millennia of living in harmony with this harsh land. We don't claim to have all answers, Asha said, while showing him how certain plants were used in healing ceremonies. But we know the land, and the land knows us. When you British came and tried to make us farmers instead of hunters, tried to settle us in one place, our people sickened. Not because of evil spirits, but because you broke something fundamental in how we live. Your way isn't wrong for you, but it's killing us. William listened with an attention Asha had never seen in a European. He asked intelligent questions, not designed to trap her in heresy, but genuinely seeking to understand. And as they talked, as they shared knowledge across the chasm of their differences, something began to grow between them. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was the recognition of kindred spirits, two people caught between worlds, two seekers of truth in an age that punished seeking. It was as the sun began to set, filling the grove with golden light, that Dakarai returned from the caves below and found Asha sitting with a British missionary, laughing softly as they compared prayers in Hadza and Latin, searching for similarities in their different ways of praising the divine. The expression on Dakarai's face was pure betrayal. What in the ancestors' names is happening here? He roared in Hadza, his hand moving instinctively to the hunting knife at his belt. Asha jumped up quickly, placing herself between William and Dakarai. Wait, let me explain. Explain what? Dakarai spat, his eyes blazing with fury. Explain why there's a damned British missionary in our sacred grove. Explain why you were sharing our knowledge with the enemy while I... He stopped abruptly, realizing he'd revealed too much. But it was too late. William had seen resistance fighters emerging from the cave system, some carrying weapons that were clearly being stored there. His expression changed from academic curiosity to horrified understanding. This grove, he said slowly, isn't just a worship space. It's... He looked at Asha with eyes that begged her to contradict him. A resistance stronghold. Asha closed her eyes, knowing her carefully balanced world had just collapsed. Dakarai knew her secret with William. William knew the secret of the resistance. And she stood trapped between two men, two worlds, two impossible futures. Kill him! Dakarai ordered coldly. Now! Before he can report us. No! Asha said firmly, extending her arms to shield William. You won't. You protect him. Dakarai's voice was filled with disbelief and something more painful. Betrayal. Asha, have you forgotten who he is? What he represents? His people enslave us, kill us, destroy everything we are. And you protect him as if... His voice cracked, as if he means something to you. Everyone means something to me, Asha replied, though she knew that wasn't the complete truth. In those few hours, William had become more than an Englishman, more than a missionary. He had become a mirror reflecting her own doubts, a soul that resonated with hers in ways that even Dakarai, with all his physical passion, had never achieved. William stood slowly, his hand lightly touching Asha's shoulder in thanks. Then, in surprisingly good Hadza, he addressed Dakarai. You are right not to trust me. I am your enemy by birth and position, but I swear by the God we both worship, though we call him by different names, that your secret is safe with me. English oaths are worth less than dust, Dakarai spat. Then trust this. If I reveal this place, I reveal I was here, that I knew about it and didn't report it immediately. In the British system, that makes me complicit. They'd ask questions I couldn't answer without admitting I've questioned the faith. And to the mission society, doubt is as damnable as paganism. He turned to Asha, and in his eyes she saw the same question she was asking herself. How had their world changed so much in a single day? I'll return, William said. if you'll permit me. I have so many questions, so much to learn, and perhaps together we can find a way for our peoples to live in something other than mutual hatred. After William left, promising to return in 3 days, Asha turned to face Dakarai, knowing the conversation that followed would change everything between them. How long? Dakarai asked, his voice dangerously quiet. How long have you been planning to betray us? I'm not betraying anyone, Asha replied. I'm trying to find a way to survive that doesn't require more death. Can't you see your path? The path of violence and armed resistance only brings more suffering to our people. And yours, sitting and talking with the enemy, what does that bring? Survival on your knees? Surrender disguised as spiritual understanding? He moved to her, taking her by the shoulders with desperate intensity. I love you, Asha. You broke your sacred vows for me. You risk your life hiding me and the others here. But if you choose that missionary, if you choose his world over ours... It's not about choosing worlds, Asha interrupted. It's about finding a path where both worlds can exist. Dakarai, I love you. But the love we share is love of the body, born from need and desperation. What I felt today with William, she stopped, seeing the pain in Dakarai's eyes, was different. It was connection of the soul, the kind of understanding that goes beyond physical attraction. So you've already chosen him, Dakarai said, releasing her. The healer who broke her vows for me now chooses a British priest who supposedly has broken his for her. How ironic. He headed toward the cave chambers but stopped at the threshold. When he betrays you, and he will, because they're English and betrayal is in their blood, don't come to me for comfort. I'll have gone to do what I should have done from the beginning. Fight for our people with actions, not with pretty words and shared prayers. And with that, Dakarai disappeared into the shadows, leaving Asha alone in the grove with the weight of 2 impossible loves pressing against her heart. She had broken her sacred vows once for passion. Now she faced the possibility of breaking her heart by choosing between 2 men who represented 2 radically different futures for her and her people. And worst of all, she knew that no matter what she chose, someone she loved would end up destroyed. The following days were the longest of Asha's life. Dakarai had left the grove with his fighters, leaving only a brief note. Prepare the grove for war, or prepare to lose me. He hadn't returned since, and while part of her felt relieved not to face his anger, another part, the part that remembered nights of passion and whispered love, suffered from his absence. But it was William who filled her thoughts most frequently. The missionary returned as promised, not once but every day, always arriving at dusk when the bush paths were safest. Each visit deepened their connection in ways Asha had never experienced. It wasn't physical love. Both respected the vows they had made, even as they questioned them constantly. It was something deeper and, in some ways, more dangerous. It was the intimacy of souls recognizing each other, the kind of connection that transcends cultures and religions. One afternoon, while studying traditional healing methods, William made an observation that left Asha breathless. "You're spirits of the land," he said, tracing drawings in the dust. "You say they give life to all things, that humans are just one part of a greater whole, that we must live in balance with nature or face consequences." He looked up at her, his eyes shining with something like revelation. "Don't you see the parallels with Christ's teachings?" He also spoke of stewardship of creation, of humans as caretakers, not conquerors. The Sermon on the Mount talks about the lilies of the field, the birds of the air, recognizing divinity in nature. He reached across and took her hands, the first intentional physical contact between them, and Asha felt an electricity completely different from what she'd felt with Dakarai. It wasn't the fire of carnal passion, but something more subtle and profound. "Every day I spend with you, William said. I question more the certainties I was taught in Oxford. They told me there's only one way to worship God, one correct path to salvation. But when I see you perform your ceremonies with such devotion, when I hear the wisdom in your teachings, when I see the love in your eyes for the divine, how can I believe all of that is the devil's work? He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. Asha, what I feel terrifies me. Not just questioning my faith, that's intellectual treason. But what I feel for you, that's... He struggled with the words. Treason of the heart, Asha completed, her own voice barely audible. I know, I feel it too. The moment stretched between them, charged with everything they couldn't say, everything they couldn't do. Two spiritual leaders, one Christian, one Hadza, both committed to vows of celibacy, both discovering that the heart doesn't ask permission before it loves. It was Asha who pulled away first, knowing that if she didn't, they would cross a line from which there would be no return. This can't happen, she said firmly, more to convince herself than him. Your God and mine forbid this, and beyond the gods, there's reality. You're British and I'm Hadza. You're a missionary and I'm a traditional healer. Between us lie 500 years of history and hatred. And also love, William added softly. Love for truth, for the sacred, for finding beauty where we were taught to see only sin. Asha, I don't pretend to have answers, but I know this. In all my life of prayer and study, I've never felt God closer than when I'm here with you, learning about a faith I'm supposedly meant to condemn. It was then they heard voices, loud, furious voices approaching the grove. Asha recognized one immediately. Dakarai had returned, and he wasn't alone. You need to hide, Asha urged William, pushing him toward a concealed chamber behind the main altar. If he finds you here... What? William asked. He'll kill me? Asha, I knew the risks when I decided to come. It's not just your life, she replied. If they kill you, there will be reprisals. The British will come searching for the missing missionary. They'll find this place. Everything I've protected, the teachings, the grove, the women I'm training, all will be destroyed. Please, hide. Not for you, but for everything else. William nodded and disappeared into the shadows, just as Dakarai burst into the clearing with 6 armed hunters. His face was covered in trail dust and something darker. Blood. What happened? Asha asked, running toward him, momentarily forgetting their estrangement. We ambushed a British patrol, Dakarai said with grim satisfaction. 3 dead, 2 wounded who escaped. It's only a matter of time before they come looking. He turned to his men. Bring the weapons and supplies from the lower level. Prepare the grove for defense. No, Asha said firmly. I told you I wouldn't let you turn this sacred place into a battlefield. You no longer have a choice, Dakarai replied. The British are less than a day's march away. When they arrive, this will be the only defensible position for kilometers. Would you rather leave the grove intact for them to destroy or use it to survive one more day? Asha felt her world crumbling. Dakarai, if you use this grove to fight, you're leading them directly here. You can't defend ancient trees against British rifles. I'm not defending trees, Dakarai roared. I'm defending our people. And if your precious grove becomes rubble in the process, at least it will be because we fought, not because we knelt before our conquerors like you seem willing to do. The comment struck exactly where Dakarai intended. But before Asha could respond, one of the hunters shouted, There's someone in the back chamber. Asha's heart stopped as she watched 2 hunters drag William from his hiding place. The missionary didn't resist, allowing himself to be brought before Dakarai, his eyes seeking Asha's with a mixture of apology and resignation. Interesting, Dakarai said with a dangerously quiet voice. The missionary returns. How many times has he been here, Asha? How many more secrets have you told him while I risked my life fighting for our people? He's not your enemy, Asha began. But Dakarai interrupted with a bitter laugh. Not my enemy? He wears the cloth of those who burn our sacred sites. He worships the god in whose name they enslave us. And worst of all, his voice broke with raw emotion. He has your heart in a way I never did, even when you shared your body with me. The silence that followed was absolute. The hunters looked between Dakarai and Asha with uncomfortable understanding. William closed his eyes as if Dakarai's words physically hurt him. Choose, Dakarai said, his voice cold as stone. The hunter who fights for your people, or the missionary who represents their destruction. The love of the body that honors our tradition, or the love of the soul that betrays everything we are. Choose now, because when the British arrive tomorrow, there will be no time for doubts. Asha looked between the two men. Dakarai, with his fierce strength and unbreakable commitment to physical resistance, represented her people's past, tradition, pride, refusal to submit. William, with his gentle doubts and search for spiritual truth, represented a possible future, one where reconciliation might replace revenge, where different faiths could coexist. I can't choose between two men, she said finally, but I can choose what kind of person I want to be. And I won't be the person who allows this grove, this sacred space dedicated to healing and harmony, to become a war camp. She turned to Dakarai. If you want to fight, fight. But not here. Take your hunters and face the British on ground you choose, not in a place you profane with every weapon you store, with every plan of violence you make. Then to William. And you, if you truly believe our faiths aren't enemies, prove it. When the British soldiers come looking for revenge for the men Dakarai killed, intercede. Use your position to protect this place, not for me, but because it's right. And you, Dakarai asked bitterly, what will you do while we clean up the mess your indecision created? I'll do what I've always done, Asha replied with a dignity that surprised even herself. Preserve what can be preserved, teach what can be taught, and pray to the spirits, to Christ, to whoever will listen, that somehow we find a path that doesn't end in more death. Dakarai looked at her for a long moment, and in his eyes she saw the exact instant something broke between them. I always knew I'd lose you, he said with a hollow voice. I just thought it would be to the mission society, not to a missionary himself. At least that would have had honor. He turned to his hunters. We're leaving. Let the healer keep her sacred grove and her British priest. When they both burn at the mission society's judgment, because that's where this is heading, let them know they could have died as warriors instead of as traitors. As Dakarai and his men left, Asha felt tears streaming down her face. She had chosen, even if she hadn't admitted it directly, she had chosen the possibility of peace over the certainty of war, spiritual love over physical, future over past. She turned to William, who had watched everything in silence. Do you think I'm a traitor? She asked. William approached slowly, carefully, as if approaching something sacred and fragile. I think, he said softly, you're the bravest person I've ever met. You gave up the safe love of a man who fights for your people, risking being called a traitor because you saw a greater truth that preserving your cultural soul matters more than preserving its capacity to kill. He extended his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Asha took it. The contact sent a spark through both of them, an acknowledgement that they had crossed a threshold from which there was no return. But he's right about one thing, William continued. When the British soldiers come, and they will both face consequences. You for protecting a missionary who knows about resistance but doesn't report it. Me for knowing a sacred grove exists and not destroying it. The mission society won't forgive either betrayal. Then we must make sure it's worth it, Asha said. If we're going to face judgment, let it be while doing something that matters. Help me document everything I can of our healing practices, our spiritual wisdom. If this grove falls, at least its knowledge will survive. They worked through the night, Asha dictating in Hadza while William wrote in English, creating a hybrid document that preserved Hadza wisdom in a form that could survive British destruction. It was an act of love, not romantic love they both felt growing, but deeper love for knowledge, for truth, for preserving beauty in a world bent on destroying it. As dawn approached, as they both knew British soldiers would arrive soon, William stopped writing and looked at Asha with an intensity that took her breath away. There's something I need to say before it's too late, he began. My vows as a priest forbid me to love a woman. Your vows as a healer forbid you to love a man. But Asha, if loving your soul, your mind, your spirit is sin, then I'm guilty. And if there's a God who condemns that kind of love, the kind that makes us better, wiser, more compassionate, then perhaps that's not a God worth worshipping. Asha felt her heart breaking and healing simultaneously. In Hadza tradition, she said softly, we believe some souls are meant to find each other across multiple lifetimes. When I met you, William, it was like recognizing something I already knew. I can't explain it any other way. She moved closer, their faces inches apart. But this can't happen. Not now, perhaps not ever. Not while we both serve institutions that forbid us to be together. Then let me serve a different institution, William said with sudden decision. One that values truth over tradition, love over law, preservation over destruction. Asha, I don't know what that future looks like, but I know I want to build it with you. It was then they heard the sounds, the unmistakable sounds of a British military patrol approaching. The moment had come. They would have to face the consequences of their choices. But instead of fear, Asha felt something else. Clarity. Dakarai had chosen the path of war. She and William had chosen a different path. One that might not save their lives, but might save something more important. The possibility that two worlds could learn to love instead of destroy. She turned to William. When the soldiers arrive, let me speak first. You're their brother in faith. They'll have to listen to you. Convince them this grove isn't a threat, but a treasure deserving preservation. And if I can't? William asked. Then we'll try to find another way. Asha replied, but at least we'll have tried. At least we'll have proven that love is possible even between enemies. And maybe that faith in itself is the truest of all. The British patrol that arrived at the grove was led by Captain Richard Thompson, a veteran of suppressing the Maji rebellion who had brought his brutality from the south. He was exactly the type of man who would show no mercy to pagans or traitors to the faith. When his soldiers surrounded the grove and found Asha waiting at the entrance with Father William at her side, the confusion on the captain's face was evident. Father William, Thompson said with distrust, the missing missionary. We've been searching for you for days. Why are you with this native woman? Because, Captain, William replied with a calm he didn't feel. I've discovered something the church and crown need to know. This grove wasn't abandoned 20 years ago, as our records claim. It's been operating secretly, preserving knowledge we believed lost. And you didn't report this immediately? Thompson's voice became dangerous. Father, that sounds like complicity with heathenism. What it sounds like, interrupted another voice, is that the good father was gathering evidence before making accusations. From behind, the soldiers emerged Reverend Marcus Thornton, the regional missionary supervisor, known throughout East Africa for his zeal in eliminating any trace of traditional beliefs. Reverend Thornton, William greeted, bowing respectfully, though Asha could see tension in every line of his body. I didn't expect to find you here. News of resistance attacks and a missing missionary travel fast, the Reverend responded, his cold eyes assessing everything in the scene. And when a priest disappears at the same time, one suspects connections. His gaze fell on Asha. This woman. Who is she? For the next hour, something extraordinary happened. William, instead of condemning, presented an argument for preservation. With Asha translating when necessary, he showed the Reverend medicinal plants that could save British lives. He explained Hadza ecological knowledge that could improve colonial agriculture. He demonstrated how their understanding of seasonal patterns was more accurate than European predictions. I agree, William said carefully, that pagan religious beliefs must be corrected. But destroying all knowledge of a civilization because their religion differs from ours, isn't that wasting the gifts God gave them to understand His creation? Reverend Thornton listened with an impenetrable expression. When William finished, there was a long, tense silence. "A clever argument, Father William," the Reverend said finally. "Almost convinces me your interest in this place is purely academic." He stepped closer to Asha, studying her with the intensity of a hawk evaluating prey. "But I see in your eyes and in hers something more than intellectual interest." He turned to Captain Thompson. "Arrest both of them. The woman for practicing forbidden rituals, the priest for complicity, and I suspect, breaking his vows of celibacy." "No," Asha protested. "Father William has broken no vows. We've done nothing beyond talk, learn from each other." "And that," interrupted Reverend Thornton, "is precisely the problem. Dialogue with paganism is the first door to heresy. You, woman, have seduced not his body, something worse, his soul. You've led him away from the certainties of true faith and dragged him into the relativist swamp where all beliefs are treated as equally valid." He turned to William. "Do you deny you've begun to question the exclusivity of Christian salvation? Do you deny you've considered that pagan gods might be manifestations of the same God we worship?" William stood silent, and in that silence, Asha saw his condemnation, because he couldn't deny what was true. "As I thought," Reverend Thornton said with grim satisfaction. "Captain, escort both to Arusha. They'll face judgment. The woman for pagan heresy, the priest for apostasy." He paused, letting the weight of that word settle. In the missionary code, apostasy, abandoning the Christian faith, was punished the same as active paganism, complete expulsion and social death. As soldiers moved to bind them, Asha searched the shadows desperately. Where was Dakarai? Had he truly abandoned her, or... Suddenly, an arrow whistled through the air, embedding itself in the tree trunk inches from Reverend Thornton's head. From the surrounding bush, Dakarai emerged with his hunters, bows drawn and arrows nocked. "Release the healer," Dakarai ordered in clear English, "or the Reverend dies first." The situation instantly became a powder keg. British soldiers drew their rifles. Hadza hunters tensed their bows. One wrong move would trigger a massacre. "Dakarai, no," Asha shouted. "This isn't the solution." "The solution?" Dakarai replied bitterly. "I tried your way, talking, understanding, building bridges, and here you are, being arrested anyway. At least my way dies fighting." Reverend Thornton, surprisingly calm despite the arrow aimed at his chest, spoke. "So this grove was a resistance base. Father William, your complicity is even worse than I thought." "Wait," William said quickly. "There's another option, one that avoids bloodshed." He turned to Asha, and in that moment she saw in his eyes what he was about to propose. "Reverend Thornton, if you release Asha, if you allow this grove to be preserved as a historical site under church supervision, I will publicly renounce my vows and submit to judgment for apostasy." "What?" Asha gasped. "No, William, you can't." "It's the only way," William said softly. "Your life for mine, your people's knowledge preserved for my sacrifice. Isn't that what Christ taught?" "Interesting proposition," Reverend Thornton said. "But why would I accept?" "Because a priest publicly renouncing his vows for a pagan cause sends a stronger message than executing an unknown healer. It would demonstrate the church's vigilance, and you'd gain cooperation, She could teach other missionaries about native medicine, agriculture, under Catholic supervision. There was a long silence. Dakarai lowered his bow slightly, confused by this turn. No, Asha said firmly. I don't accept. William, you can't sacrifice yourself for me. She turned to Dakarai, seeing him truly for the first time in days. And you, thank you for coming, for risking everything despite how we ended. That's the man I loved. She stood between the two men, looking between them. In that moment of absolute clarity, she finally understood. Dakarai, she said with a clear voice, you are the strength of our people. You are pride, resistance, everything that makes us refuse to disappear. I will always love you for that. But the love we shared was born from desperation, from need. She turned to William. And you showed me that bridges are possible, that understanding can exist. You touched my soul in ways no one had. But the price you ask, your life for mine, isn't love. It's martyrdom. She took a deep breath. I won't choose between you. Because the real choice isn't between two men. It's about what I believe is worth more. Preserving the past through resistance or building the future through reconciliation. And in this moment, I see both paths have value. She addressed Reverend Thornton directly. I'll make a different deal. I'll submit to church supervision. I'll teach what I know, medicine, agriculture, history, to whoever wants to learn. The Grove can become a school, a place where Hadza and British knowledge meet. But William remains a priest, and Dakarai and his men receive safe passage. And what do I gain? The Reverend asked. Something more valuable than executions, Asha replied. You gain proof that conversion works. That native peoples can be integrated, not eliminated. Imagine the report to London. The Reverend who converted a sacred pagan grove into a center of learning, who transformed the last traditional healer into a Christian teacher. Reverend Thornton conceded. It was brilliant manipulation. Asha offered what the missionary system most wanted: visible victory, public conversion, justification of their methods. I accept, he said finally, but with conditions. The Grove will be consecrated as a Christian chapel. You will teach, but under constant supervision of a Franciscan overseer. He looked at William. Father William will be that overseer. His penance for this indiscretion will be ensuring your conversion is genuine and complete. He turned to Dakarai. As for you and your hunters, you have 1 week to leave this region. If you're seen after, you'll be executed as bandits. This is the only safe passage you'll receive. Dakarai's face showed a mixture of relief and betrayal. So this is what you chose, he said to Asha. To submit to them. To convert our sacred grove into their school? I chose survival over purity, Asha replied. I chose for our knowledge to live, even if in different form. Dakarai, your path, fighting until death, has honor. But someone must live to pass on who we are. Dakarai looked at her for a long moment. Finally, he nodded with painful understanding. Then this is our farewell. I'll live as a warrior. You live as whatever this makes you. He approached, taking her face in his hands one last time. I loved you, Asha. Never doubt that, but you're right. Ours was the incomplete love of bodies seeking each other without souls fully aligning. He kissed her softly on the forehead, a gesture of blessing and release. Be happy, or at least be free within whatever chains you've chosen. As Dakarai and his hunters disappeared into the bush, Asha felt a chapter closing. The love of the body, the love of the past, was leaving. But not with bitterness, with mutual respect for different paths. She turned to William, who had watched everything in silence. And you? She asked. Can you live with this? Being my supervisor, my jailer, while pretending your faith hasn't changed? Why? William smiled sadly. Pretend? Asha, My faith has changed. But perhaps it changed towards something truer. If I can spend my days learning from you, teaching with your knowledge, building something that honors both your people and mine, that's more than I dared hope. He extended his hand, formal but with warmth in his eyes. I'll be your supervisor, but I'll also be your student, your friend, and perhaps with time when circumstances are different. No, Asha interrupted gently but firmly. We can't live for a perhaps. We both made vows, you to your God, me to mine. I broke mine once for Dakarai, and learned that physical love without soul connection leaves emptiness. With you, I have soul connection, but if we add the physical, we destroy exactly what makes our bond sacred. She took his hand, holding it with affection but not romance. Will be something the world rarely sees. Two people from opposite worlds who love each other deeply but choose not to consummate that love. Because sometimes the purest love is the one that remains unfulfilled, the one that exists as ideal, as inspiration, as proof that connection can exist without possession. 5 years later, the ancient sacred grove of the ancestors was unrecognizable and yet familiar. The traditional Hadza shrines had been removed, replaced by a simple wooden cross. But on the walls, carefully preserved, remained the original carvings, now explained as historical art, rather than religious idols. The Cultural Integration School, as it was officially named, had become something unique in all of British East Africa. Asha, now known formally as Teacher Asha, taught traditional medicine to both British and Hadza students. Father William gave theology classes but incorporated Hadza philosophy, showing parallels between Christ's teachings and traditional wisdom. It wasn't perfect. Purists on both sides criticized them. British, who saw contamination of true faith. Hadza, who saw betrayal of traditions. But slowly, they were creating something new. A space where knowledge flowed in both directions, where young people from both cultures learned to see humanity in each other. On a December afternoon, as the setting sun painted the ancient grove gold, Asha and William walked through the garden they had cultivated together, a mixture of traditional medicinal plants and European herbs, each with healing properties. Do you ever regret? William asked. He didn't need to specify. Both knew what he meant. Did she regret the choice she'd made 5 years ago? Every day, Asha admitted honestly. I regret that Dakarai and I ended without true closure. I regret that you and I can never be what our hearts desire. I regret that this place, which was pure, is now compromise. She stopped, looking at him directly. But I don't regret being alive. That our knowledge survives. That students, like that mixed heritage girl who yesterday asked if she could be a healer, see a future that was impossible before. Regret and gratitude can coexist. William nodded. I've come to understand that. And I've come to understand something else, that love has many forms. What you and I share, this soul connection without consummation, is its own kind of love. Not less than what you shared with Dakarai, just different. Have you heard from him? Asha asked. Rumors, William replied. They say he leads resistance in the southern mountains, that his legend grows among the discontented, that someday he might organize a serious uprising. Good, Asha said with a sad smile. The world needs both warriors and teachers. Both preserve our people. He through resistance, I through education. Neither is superior. Just different paths to the same destination, survival. They sat on a smooth stone bench, close enough to feel each other's warmth, not so close as to break the appropriate distance they maintained. It was their daily ritual, this moment of shared quiet at day's end. Do you think in another life we could have been different? William asked softly, without vows, without conquest, without all the barriers between us? Perhaps, Asha replied, but then we wouldn't be us. We are who we are precisely because of those barriers. Our connection is deep because we had to dig through mountains of difference to reach it. She stood, extending her hand formally, the gesture they had developed, signifying affection without impropriety. Thank you, William, for saving my life, for respecting my choices, for building this with me. William took her hand, holding it a moment longer than necessary but less than desired. No, thank you, for teaching me that God is bigger than any religion, that love is more complicated than any category, that sometimes not getting what you want is a more precious gift than receiving it. As night fell over the grove, converted to school, over the place where war had been replaced by learning, Asha thought about the three choices she had made. First, breaking her vows for Dakarai, learning that passion without soul connection was insufficient. Second, connecting with William, discovering that soul love without consummation was its own form of sacred. Third, choosing survivals through compromise over purity through martyrdom. Accepting that living to build the future sometimes required sacrificing the perfect past. None of the choices were easy. None were completely right or wrong, but all were hers, made with open eyes and full heart. Somewhere in the southern mountains, Dakarai was building his legacy through resistance. Here, in this transformed grove, Asha was building hers through education. And beside her, a missionary who had questioned everything he had been taught was learning that sometimes the questions are more sacred than the answers. Years later, when students asked about the school's history, they were told a simplified version, a traditional healer who converted and helped preserve native knowledge, a visionary missionary who saw value in indigenous culture. But those who knew the complete story, the few who understood the impossible triangle of love, sacrifice, and choice, knew a more complex truth, that Asha hadn't chosen between two men. She had chosen a third option no one offered her, to choose herself, her mission, her vision of a future where love could exist without possession, where knowledge could be preserved without purity, where bridges could be built without destroying either side. And in that choice, so imperfect, so complicated, so human, she had created something more lasting than any passion consumed or any war won. She had created possibility. The possibility that two worlds could learn to love instead of destroy,